Hey all, so welcome back to another video, and this would be the fifth time I'm trying to make this video today. So my first two attempts were in the morning at about 8 a.m. Sydney Australia time, and um, the last two attempts, the last two attempts, including this one, is at 9 p.m. So hopefully I get it right this time. During the day, I was out of my first few times in the morning. After my first few times in the morning, I had to go to my day job. So once I got home, finished my dinner and all that, I thought, well, I've got some free time, so let me try making these videos again. So here we are. So in this video, I'll talk a little bit about my process of um, hosting a React app, deploying a React app on AWS, and then making it publicly available via a secure endpoint, that is HTTPS. Okay, so before we get on to that, I'll talk about the two repositories that I've been working on. So for those of you who've been following these videos, you may know that I've got two repositories that I contribute code to every day, or almost for that I've been contributing code to for the last 2 to 3 weeks, and last 3.5 weeks actually, yeah. And that's React TypeScript tutorials and Node TypeScript CRUD nodes. These two repositories are there on GitHub, and it's for you to see and have a play with it, and feel free to contribute to it. You can contribute by either creating an issue of issue whether or not if you'd like to see something from those repositories, or better, you can contribute code to it. You can add some code to it. My aim for creating these two repositories, my purpose was to add some code there and ensure that it serves as a good starting point if we were to solve problems similar to the problems that the code solves. For example, to use to add social auth to your React app and use Google for login, or to do things like to use material UI to style your React app, or in case of NodeJS, things such as how to save data to a file, data to a file on file system, or how to how to integrate a Node backend with an AWS S3 Node backend that uses TypeScript to save data, persist data to AWS DynamoDB, or how to deploy a Node.js TypeScript app to Elastic Beanstalk instance. Right. So okay, so that should be it. Check it out. I'll put a link to those repositories in the description of this video, so please have a go at it. Right. So moving on. So the reason for which I'm making this video. So let me see how many minutes are we at. Okay, we're about 3.5 minutes. So okay, cool. We've got. Let me see if I can zip up all this in like the next 7 or 8 minutes, and just to be on the safe side. Okay, now sorry. The reason why I said to be on the safe side is because I can't upload videos longer than 15 minutes on YouTube. Anyway, so I've got a site. I've got a React app, and that uses Google login for authentication, and the app is created such that only you can use the app without logging in, but it has very limited users. But should you log in, the app opens up and you can access everything in the app. So yeah, it's a simple app using Google login that uses Google Log for login. Now I wanted to host it somewhere, and I wanted to host it on AWS because I'm using the AWS free tier right now. So right, so I wanted to deploy it on AWS, and then so I did a little online search on what are some of the best practices for this, and what came up is that what's common practice is that you build your React app and you actually host the contents, you deploy the contents of it in an S3 bucket, S3 bucket, simple storage service. You can look it up on your free time, and then it's just Amazon. It's a data store on AWS, so you can just store a whole bunch of stuff there. You can create buckets and store a whole bunch of things there. Anyway, so one of the things that you can do with the bucket is that you can actually deploy all your you can build your React app and deploy the code for the React app to those buckets, and you can turn on static website hosting. When you turn on the static website hosting, it would actually show it would just host your website. It would give you a URL, and that would which you can enter the browser and access the contents of your site. That's great. That sounds good. So I created an S3 bucket, and I deployed all the contents of my site on it, and then I had a domain on a different site, like say GoDaddy, and then I actually created a hosted zone in Route 53 in AWS, and I updated the name servers of my domain in GoDaddy, so it actually points to those. So it actually points to AWS. So I had a domain in GoDaddy. I had a hosted zone in Route 53, and I pointed that domain to my S3 bucket by creating a record. So I'll add details to all of this in the description of this video, but I'll keep it brief now. So quick, I can access my website via domain that I've configured in domain that I've configured in Route 53 in the form of a hosted zone. That was all working, but then I wanted to use Google login on my site. Now it was working great locally, but then when I actually deployed that, it wasn't working. Why? Because I had to add another URI. Now to add a URI, well, I didn't say where I had to add the URI. Okay, so for you to use Google login in your app or website, you would need to go to Google Cloud Platform, like the GCP console, and then create an app there, and then add a redirect URI. So if you have Google authentication, if you enable that for your app, you need to add a redirect URI. So it's a location where Google can redirect your when the user tries login, it's a location where Google can redirect to. So the reason why this wasn't working the reason why this wasn't really working it was working locally, and it wasn't working when I deployed it on S3 bucket and pointed the domain to it, is because I had not added a redirect URI, and it wasn't my redirect URI was not secure. So localhost will work because Google doesn't care about localhost, because you can just keep experimenting. But as soon as you change the location of your site, which is using Google login to a production URL, then it would need to be via a secure endpoint. So it has to be a HTTPS URL and not a HTTP endpoint. Okay, so what this meant was I had to secure my domain. I had to create a secure. I had to secure the way in which I serve the contents of my site from S3. Sorry, I'm losing a little bit there. Okay, so a way to do that. I found out a way to do that was to use this thing called CloudFront. CloudFront is it's another service by AWS, and it's a CDN, a content delivery network. And with CloudFront, it's a way in which you can actually serve your S3 your static website on S3 bucket via a secure endpoint. Okay, that's all right. So now to do that, I had to create a CloudFront distribution. So I went on and started creating CloudFront distribution. Now, while creating a CloudFront distribution, I realized that I actually have to create I have to request an SSL certificate. So one of the options is to actually serve it via SSL HTTPS. So to do that, I have to go to certificate manager and I had to request a certificate for my domain, and that's in my case it was mydatado's.com. Now while I was trying to request certificate in certificate manager for that domain, I did the domain.com as well as star.domain.com. So in my case, mydatado's.com and then star.mydatado's.com. Just to make sure the SSL certificate covers your domain as well as subdomains. Okay, so I requested the certificate and then it was issued, and I could create my CloudFront distribution. After I created the CloudFront distribution, I also had to, it created a policy for me. Now this policy is something that allows CloudFront to access the contents of the S3 bucket. So one of the settings in the S3 bucket is to actually turn public access off. That means that not everyone can access it. And so, but when you create a CloudFront distribution and the policy that it creates, you take that policy and you copy it onto the permissions of your S3 bucket, and that means your CloudFront distribution has got access to the S3 bucket. Okay, so that was done, and then I had to create a bunch of CNAME records in my Route 53, in my hosted zone and Route 53 for my domain. In my case, it was mydatado's.com. Great. So that was done, and once after creating the CloudFront distribution, I now had a way to serve my site, static website on S3 via secure endpoint. Great. And so I could update the redirect URI. I could add the redirect URI in Google GCP console, and then it all just worked. Now the second step here, this is a minor, well, it depends on how you look at it, but anyway, so the second step was I deployed my API on Elastic Beanstalk. So I had a REST API and that was deployed on Elastic Beanstalk. And for that one, I created another CNAME record in my hosted zone on Route 53. I pointed that to the Elastic Beanstalk environment. So just say api.domainname.com. So, and see this, and then I could also serve that. So that worked. And now for me to serve the subdomain like api.domainname.com via secure endpoint, I had to create a listener in the load balancer and configure a port, in my case 443, that would accept an SSL connection. So once I did that, I had both a static website as well as a backend, and they were both served via a secure endpoint. So it was there's a whole bunch of nuances in here, and it was all very confusing. It was very straightforward, but the reason why it was confusing, because you really have to be careful about like some of the naming and things that you have to do. Like a lot of these things have to sort of match up, otherwise it just won't work and you'd have no idea why it isn't working. But I'll write a little blog post about this, just covering all these steps in slightly more detail, and I'll put a link to that blog post in the description of this video as well. So okay, hopefully this is my 5th video, and how are we time? Okay, we're doing okay with time, so we are nearly 40 minutes. Alright, I hope you found something useful in this video. Please check out my blog and have a look at the 2 repositories that I've talked about. I'll put a link to all that in the description of this video, so please check it out. And until next time, live long and prosper.